right, everyone. Welcome back to another show of Dirty Money. This week, we have for you Ryan Reynolds sells his company for billions of dollars. Starlink, what is it and why do we keep seeing it in the sky and think it's aliens? Also, Meta pays millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to get out of their leases currently, and Target's closing down stores all over the country. We're going to get into all that this week on Dirty Money. But before we do that, make sure to like and subscribe. It really helps us out to grow the channel a bit. Also, if you're following us on any of the social medias, we're at Dirty Money Show, as well as if you're listening to us on a podcast, please do me a favor, give us a 5-star review. It helps to put us at the top so more people will listen to us. Again, I've got a good show going for you, but first off, we're going to talk about Ryan Reynolds, and he sold a company. Now it finally closed for billions of dollars. It's called Mint Mobile. Now, you might know Ryan Reynolds from all the movies that he's in. Super famous guy, lead actor in Deadpool. But beyond that, this guy is a real entrepreneur. And he takes his fame and he pushes it to the next level. He's done all kinds of marketing deals. I mean, the Deadpool movies actually accredit their success to his ability for marketing them. So it's pretty interesting to really look at his whole portfolio. He didn't really start branching out into the entrepreneur world until 2018. That's when he created his own digital marketing company, along with doing some other interesting things. But right now, he just was a 25% owner in a company called Mint Mobile that sold for $1.3 billion. So he ended up doing Mint Mobile with a guy named David Glickman. He was impressed by how Reynolds actually promoted Deadpool and really took it to the next level because the studio from the movie producing side was constantly cutting the budget, and they had to do different things with the Deadpool series to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more appealing, kind of put the edge on it. Instead of using money for special effects, Ryan Reynolds is over here talking more about entertaining people with comedy and things like that. So it's a very, very interesting take on how he did it. But really, what moved him forward is that Mint Mobile is now netted him $300 million. Mint Mobile started in 2016 in Costa Mesa, California. About 2019, Reynolds acquired 25% of Mint Mobile because David Glickman directly targeted him to promote the company. Now, in 2021, Mint Mobile was voted the number one fastest growing company in America, and ended up selling to T-Mobile for $1.3 billion. Now, prior to that, Ryan Reynolds in 2018 opened up a company called Maximum Effort, and that's a digital marketing agency and a production company that helps to market and produce different kinds of films and to be kind of coaches and to really put people in play in the marketing world. Now, a guy with a couple million followers, obviously he can do well with everything there. So, Mint Mobile itself makes about $100 million a year, but this company sold for 1.3 billion to T-Mobile, and they're basically a prepaid phone service. So it's really interesting to think that he was able to market this company well enough over the last 3 years that it turns into $1 billion asset. Now, he did get involved with a couple other companies in down the road. So he, in 2018, along with opening Maximum Effort, his digital agency, he got involved and took a portion of Aviation Gin brand, which is a gin. Now, literally 2 years later, Aviation Gin sold to Diego, which is a huge conglomerate of alcohol company, for $600 million. So between the two companies in the last 3 years, he's almost to 2 billion in sales, and he's really the driving force to get the company out and about and the people. Now, along with this, he purchased an English soccer team called the Wrexham FC for 2.5 million. And he's been involved with a whole bunch of stuff after all this is happening. He's done like $600 million in funding rounds for Canadian fintech Wealthsimple. He's also received they've received a $5 billion valuation In 2022, he was part of a 620 million Series C funding round for a password management platform called One Password. It's now valued about 6.8 billion. And he's done a whole lot. He was actually on CNBC, and he said the big thing that he's known and learned about marketing is it's all about storytelling, which he is 100% accurate. If you want to market a product, you want to uh, reach the public, you really got to tell a story and have people engage. You can show them the product, but before the product has brand recognition, there needs to be a story behind it. So when you're watching commercials and you're seeing, 30-second, 60-second advertisements, you have to look at it from the story perspective. And you'll see that the brands that are less recognizable, that are more startup brands or early brands, those tend to have a little bit more of a storyline in the advertising. Now, the monster conglomerates like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Kraft, those type of people, they just blast their logo in front of you, and it's kind of like second nature. You know exactly what it is. All it does is help put it in the forefront of your mind, brand recognition. So it's pretty interesting. He's kind of mastered the storytelling with emotional investments, and that's where he's been successful. He's asked if he was an investor, and he kind of just laughs at the idea, and reverts back to the fact that he's a storyteller. So his craft in film is extended out into the business world. He's done pretty well with it. I'm excited to see what he can do in the future. Another guy that has nothing to do with the film world, but I would say is the biggest and brightest entrepreneur in the world, is Elon Musk. And if you haven't heard of Starlink, you're going to hear of Starlink. And Starlink is a satellite based internet provider that is the brainchild of Elon Musk. And it is a subsidiary of, of SpaceX. And so 2015, Elon Musk comes up with this idea that we're going to put low orbiting Earth satellites in play using SpaceX to provide internet to people all over the world that don't have access to internet. Now, in 2015, a lot of people thought of Starlink when it first came out as like a humanitarian effort that Elon was putting together. Truth is that he's doing it for a lot of different reasons, but it also made 1.4 billion dollars in 2022. And the year prior to that, it made 220 million. Now, when you look at Starlink, you don't really know about it, but basically, it's this: you get a if you're a regular consumer, it's about a 1x2 flat panel antenna that reaches out to the satellite, kind of like a Dish Network or Direct TV would, but it's mobile. You can take it with you. A lot of people that live in vans and on boats, they have Starlink, and it works out pretty well. Um, but there's 4,700 low orbiting Earth satellites that directly connect with Starlink. They're owned by Starlink, and Elon puts them up. Now, the first 49 that was batched out about 4 years ago for Starlink, 40 of them were lost because of a geomagnetic storm, and that was a pretty big hit. Each one of these satellites to makes around 300,000, and a launch for SpaceX is around $1 million. So you're talking about essentially is $1 billion startup. Um, but I do think that this company will be a huge piece of the future, and people in remote areas really being able to stay and live in remote areas, and still have the internet luxuries that we have now, and able to access those. But interestingly, is when you see Starlink in the sky, it looks like a strand of lights just going by. And so last summer was the first time I experienced it, 2022, and I told everybody in my house to come outside. The spaceships were here, and you know, everybody in my house is kind of freaking out because they didn't know what it was. I knew what it was, and I just kind of rode along with it. But at the end of the conversation, I told everybody that no, that's Starlink. That's satellites that deliver internet to people all over the world. Right now, the Starlink for the average person, if you don't want to have the mobile, you want to keep it out of your house, is pretty much a standard price. $90 to $120 for your house. Um, Comes in with regular 200 megabits per second speed. It's good. Now, when you start reaching into wanting to be the Roam, as they say, or the Roam package, the maritime package, or the aviation package, things just start going through the roof. And so the most expensive package they have is the aviation package, which the hardware is $150,000 and it's $25,000 a month. Now, I get it. If you own an airplane, you're probably not worried about spending 150 grand or $25,000 if you have a jet. And I think that's who they're targeting, is this jet class of people with that. I was curious to find out if there was any difference between what the maritime one was for boats and actual hardware. I couldn't really dig into it unless I started to have conversations with them about purchasing their products. But ultimately, the the maritime one starts at about $250 a month, which is still pretty heavy for having internet that, I think most people are used to paying anywhere from 40 to 100 bucks a month for. So that's pretty interesting, but I couldn't believe that 150 grand to put it on a jet. And then the maritime one can actually go up to $5,000 a month, depending on how much dedicated coverage you want. So it does get pretty pricey when you really dive into it and you want the premium level for what's offered. But the concept of is everybody's starting to see, more and more now that the Starlink satellites are in the sky. People go, "What is that?" I've seen videos on it, and it's actually Starlink. It's the first time in the history that we're able to look up in the sky for more than a split second and see maybe just a flying by satellite, but to legitimately see what would look like a bunch of spaceships in the sky. So it's pretty interesting. Now, Elon, being Elon, in 2015, he said Starlink's going to make $12 billion in 2022. He was only off by a standard Elon about $11 billion. He's always pushing the envelope as much as he can to make as much noise, but he does deliver relatively well. I mean, I'm still waiting to see what this Tesla truck looks like, if it's the same one I drew when I was 6. But nonetheless, it's pretty interesting to think that, he made this come together and it's going to continue to get popular. I think once they lower the price a little bit for the maritime and for people, living in vans, which is now seems to be a thing in our culture, um, it will actually try to take off and do a little bit better. But they're going to plan to IPO the company as well once they have fiscal profitability year over year. The current CEO or COO, Gwyneth Shotwell, she's actually the president. She really wants to see quarterly positive cash flow achieved before they turn around and actually IPO the company. They'll have to spin it out of SpaceX somehow at that point, unless they plan on IPOing SpaceX. Next in line, I really want to touch on is the real estate world for commercial real estate. Meta this week dumped another lease for $181 million. So they had an 18 years left on a lease in One Triton Square in London. I mean, you talk about the best place to be in London. That was it. Um, and basically, they had 310,000 square feet leased. No one ever went there. And in order to get out of the lease, they had to pay $181 million just to get out, which is an astronomical amount of money. Now, in London, their commercial market is just completely plunged. Pretty much every major city across the world is experiencing this, except for your few pockets that are seeing significant growth. They tend to be in warmer climates. Miami is one of those places. Dallas, Texas, Houston, Texas. Those places are seeing demand for everything, whether it's housing, commercial. Things are moving forward there. But London is now 1993 was the last time that they had this much commercial space available, which to me is just a ridiculous amount of space. They were in a recession economically when that happened. So right now, the space available is just pretty crazy. for all of the United States and all of the world for the property in China. I mean, their space is imploding left and right. So I think this is the beginning that we're seeing of a worldwide steps, slow, very slow steps towards a recession. It's not We're not going to wake up tomorrow and say that we're in a worldwide recession, but the commercial real estate is going to be a big catalyst to pushing us towards that zero mark or negative mark when it comes to growth. And Meta announced at the end of last year that this is going to be the year of efficiency, and they committed to spending anywhere from $2 to $3 billion in cutting off leases for their company. Now, interestingly enough, I was trying to figure out how much money they actually pay in leases, and all I could find was their capital expenditure on their quarterlies that they send to the SEC. And their quarterlies with the capital expenditure that includes payments of leases is around $9.5 billion a quarter. So that's a significant amount of money. So $2 or $3 billion over the course of a year. That's about 10% of what they're spending annually just to lease those spaces where there's nobody really there. At the end of 2022, they paid $400 million to close space they were leasing in Penn Station area of Midtown Manhattan. So they're going to continue to look for ways to cut spending, and I think, yeah, this is probably the biggest way for them to double back and get out of that. But interesting about that is in 2021, the metaverse sold $500 million in real estate that doesn't really exist. If the internet falls apart and there's nothing left, then the metaverse doesn't exist. So people spent $500 million in 2021 on metaverse land. Which is pretty crazy. I think of it like the pet rock craze from the 70s. Um, and the truth is they don't even have a rock to hold that said they blew all their money. In total, you can see that $1.9 billion has been spent on land in the metaverse, which again to me is just crazy, crazy astronomical numbers. Meta in total, the virtual reality world is not taking hold like a lot of people thought it would. The engagement level is pretty stagnant at the moment. There was a large push 2 years ago to get the Oculus into people's hands. Commercials were everywhere. They ended up with about 10 million users. Still a significant number, but we're nothing like you see with an Apple phone or the smartphones. So then I think that's what they were trying to do is how do we compete with the smartphone market? But you got to put this whole headset on, and it gets pretty excessive. So that being said, the metaverse is down as well, 97% from its peak. So June 2023, I think the total metaverse expenditures were below 10 million for the year. So it's pretty relevant that the physical world will be followed by the metaverse. It's a loss that is being experienced on all fronts, and I think metaverse will continue to cut leases as much as they can. Um, I'm really curious how they'll take on other spots in other places. Another place that's cutting out of leases is Target. Target announced recently that they're going to eliminate 9 stores in 4 states because of theft. Okay, because of theft is kind of mind blowing. That means people like your store, but you can't stop them from stealing. What are police for? And Nordstrom's recently closed their stores, their couple stores as well. But the most stores are in the Bay Area, so they're closing 3 in San Francisco because of theft. Uh, Target thinks they're going to lose $500 million this year just from petty theft, and it's becoming more like organized crime. People go into the stores, they have baskets, they run out. There's people. I mean, I've seen videos all over where people are filling up the back of their cars or trying to walk out with carts full of food, and it's like It started during the 2020 riots that kind of took place all over the country, where people were looting and stealing, and it's kind of just perpetuated into this place where some cities that have reduced their police are experiencing a lot of theft inside of these stores. And so Target is one of the places that's really going to try to cut as much as they can. So the retailers, NRF, the retail industry's largest trade group, said that the average shrink in term for this is about 112 billion dollars losses in 2022 for theft, and it's up from 2021 and $93 billion. I mean, that's a lot of money to be losing for theft. I mean, a lot of these places have loss prevention, but it's very difficult to turn around and stop somebody. Then you have to call the police and get them involved. And if there's not enough police to show up for petty theft, then people are just going to walk out. They're going to think that they own the place. So I think this is almost becoming, it is a crisis in our country. I mean, I wouldn't put it on the level of like fentanyl, which is a whole nother crisis where more people a day die from that in the world or in the United States than I think anything else right now. It's really astronomical if you dive into that world. But I think this is going to become, a theft crisis. A lot of small stores, they're having to close their doors. Nordstrom's and Whole Foods closed stores in San Francisco because of theft. And now you have Target, publicly coming out and saying that they're having issues. The other stores that they're closing, two locations in Seattle, three more in San Francisco, and one in East Harlem. So, these are pretty open cities where they proactively reduced their police force in 2020. And so now I think the effect of that taking place, we're seeing the results of it. And it's just not a good outcome. It's not really where I would like to see our country go. I mean, I think it's really important if you work hard to build your business, you don't want people stealing from it. You're going to get what you're going to reap what you sow. So, that's going to come back around. And ultimately, Whole Foods and Nordstrom's, yeah, they can probably deal with a little bit, but it's still not a good thing to do. And Target, I would suspect you're going to see more coming from Target, coming from our other larger chains, and they're gonna start shuttering more doors. Now, I don't see Walmart doing it because Walmart's stocking policy, well, in recent years it's changed, but that company actually would force people to move their production to third world countries or people that are, basically, in my eyes, using slave labor like China, um, to produce goods. And then that way they would get it very, very low. So their loss prevention is a little bit different, and a lot of this goes back to the manufacturers because they get paid based on what gets scanned in the stores. So it's a interesting thing to think about. I suspect we're going to see more of this, and so we're getting kind of like the beginning of a storm with the commercial side of real estate. And it's interesting to think about. I want to dive into more of the real estate stuff maybe in another time in another show. The housing market is starting to, ride down a little bit as well. Again, I think we're in the beginning. Finally, I mean, everybody's been looking at the beginning for the last year, saying, soft landing, this and that about a recession. But ultimately, we're at a point where the the cause and the effect and the results are all taking place, and we're going to see more of the results portrayed through 24. And then we'll see what really takes place at around the end of 24. I suspect you're going to see a significant decline. But that's it we got for today for Dirty Money. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. If there's anything that you want me to cover, you want me to look into, leave it in the comments section below. I'm all for trying to research some things out. and see where the money goes and who's spending it, why they're spending it, and what it's being spent for. And if you enjoy the show, make sure to hit the subscribe and like. Thanks again for listening.